Hi, my name is John. Welcome to my channel, the ABCs of the SAT. And today we'll be working with the second passage of a reading section. It's a dual passage, and both passages are of the type that the SAT describes as great global conversations. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks. Let's get started. This is the second passage in this reading section, and it consists of a dual passage. That is, there are two short passages, passage one and passage two. And the College Board or SAT considers this type of passage as a great global conversation passage. And essentially, what it deals with is historical speeches or historical documents. As you can see here, that these two documents were published in 1837. In 1838, in other words, the language is going to be somewhat antiquated. So the first thing we want to do is to read the preface or introduction. And passage one is adapted from Catherine Beecher, Essay on Slavery and Abolitionism, originally published in 1837. Passage two is adapted from Angelina Grimke, Letters to Catherine Beecher, originally published in 1838. Grimke encouraged Southern women to oppose slavery publicly. Passage one is Beecher's response to Grimke's views. Passage two is Grimke's response to Beecher. Now, all this is kind of confusing, so what I've done is I've just indicated who the author of each passage was by writing the name right above the beginning of the passage, okay? Now, one thing about these dual passages is usually one author will give one viewpoint and the other author will give an opposing viewpoint, okay? So in this particular case, from the preface, we learned that Grimke encouraged Southern women to oppose slavery publicly, and therefore what we can initially assume is that Angelina Grimke, well, she's the one that encouraged Southern women to oppose slavery publicly. Then Catherine Beecher will take the opposite approach. In other words, she's going to feel that Southern women should not oppose slavery publicly, okay? And as we can see, as we read each of the passages, is that that's exactly what's happening, okay? So next we'll move on to working with the passages. There are a few things that we want to keep in mind when we're looking at a passage and beginning to read it. Usually the author will state his main idea in the first paragraph of the passage, or perhaps maybe into the first or second sentence of the second paragraph, okay? And once we have an idea as to what the author's main idea is, then we begin to read the remainder of the passage, keeping in mind that it's important for us to get to the questions, since the questions are going to indicate which parts of the passage we're going to have to pay attention to, okay? And above all, we don't have to understand every little detail or every little nuance of the passage, because you might be spending some time on a specific aspect of it, but there won't be any questions about it, okay? And then once we have the main idea, we have to know or look at what the author is doing with that main idea. Is he applying the idea into another area? Is he showing the idea's significance or wider relevance? Is he giving us examples and so on and so forth, all right? And in addition, what we want to keep an eye out for is for qualifications, which are usually indicated by what's called a direction reversal word. In this particular case, the direction reversal word is but. We got but, so on. Okay, and usually an idea is qualified by the use of a direction reversal word such as but, and other words are also direction reversal words are words like although, despite, except, however, though, and yet. Okay, and they will give us an idea as to what the author is doing with the idea or the concept that preceded the direction reversal words but. Okay, so that's the things we want to keep in mind when we first start reading a passage. And next, what we'll do is we'll actually go through the passages, passage one, and then passage two. When reading a passage, we want to read actively. That is, we want to make sure that we're not just reading words, but we're actually understanding what the author is getting to, or what he's portraying. And when you're beginning to work with reading passages, you don't want to constrict yourself by saying, I've got to finish this passage in 13 minutes, blah, 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 blah. You want to give yourself as much time as possible to practice all the things that you need to do when working with the passage. In other words, you're going to take your time and work through the passage step by step, so you get a good understanding of the things that you're going to need to do. Once you have a firm understanding and you're very comfortable with working and reading passages, then you can look at the speed aspect. But it's very important when you begin working with passages to realize that you're going to have to take your time. Okay, if it takes 10 or 15 minutes to answer a question or to understand a passage, that's fine. The more you practice, the better and more efficient and quicker you will get at working with passages. Okay, so now we're going to start working with passage one. Let's look at passage one by Catherine Beecher. So, in the very first paragraph here, she is saying that women are inferior to men. Okay, but she used these direction reversal words. But even though women are inferior to men, it's not because that it was designed that her duties or influence should be any less important or all-pervading, but it was designed that the mode of gaining influence and exercising power should be altogether different and peculiar. In other words, all that, even though women, according to this author, are inferior to men, they still exert, a powerful influence, and it's just different. They operate in a different sphere. Okay. So in the second paragraph right here, the author is saying that a man may act on society by a collusion of intellect and public debate. In other words, if you read the rest of this, he can be a scoundrel or whatever he needs to do to get something done, that's fine. And then once again, here's a direction reversal word, but. And the author is saying that what men are doing, of course, women cannot do, but that they are operating in a sphere according to generous, peaceful, and benevolent principles. Okay. And then moving on to the next paragraph, the author is just extending that particular idea, saying that all these women, the women should be working towards peace and having compassion and win everything by peace and love and so on and so forth. But that is to be accomplished in domestic and a social circle, okay? Um, in other words, her sphere is somewhat limited and it is constrained to the domestic scene. And the final paragraph right here, the author sort of reiterates her point that women can operate in a specific sphere with peace and love. And then here's the direction reversal word but. When she throws herself into a position of or attitude of a combatant, then she steps out of her appropriate sphere, okay? And then the author sums up her idea in his last sentence. If these general principles are correct, they are entirely imposed to the plan of arraying females in any abolition movement. Okay, so in other words, that women should stay out of the abolition movement because it's operating out of their normal sphere of influence. Okay. So practice using active reading when you're working with any passage. Make sure that you grasp the main idea of the paragraph, what the author is talking about. Don't just read words without understanding. Okay. So in summation for passage number 1, women are inferior to men. They operate in a different sphere. It's a domestic sphere that women should exhibit peace and love. And if they, therefore, they should be excluded from the abolitionist movement, which is, combative, a combative movement. So once again, just practice active reading. Make sure that you can summarize, what a paragraph is saying and how the author is pursuing his point. Okay, it's going to take some practice, but it's definitely worth the effort. Now we'll go on to passage 2. Now we're going to look at passage 2, and on passage 1 we found out that Catherine Beecher believes that women should not participate in the abolitionist movement. So therefore that Angelina Grimke's position would probably be the exact opposite, saying that women should participate in the abolition movement. So what she's saying, I'm just going to quickly run through this, is that the anti-slavery cause is the high school of morals in the land, the school in which human rights are more fully investigated and better understood and taught than any other. Okay, essentially, like that is the main moral issue of the time, I believe. And then she says that human beings have rights because they are moral beings. The rights of all men grow out of their moral nature, and as all men have the same moral nature, they have essentially the same rights. Okay. And then she said down here, she says, now, if rights are founded in the nature of our moral being, then the mere circumstance of sex does not give to man higher rights and responsibilities than to women. Okay, so we can see her beginning to make an argument that women should participate in the abolition movement. Okay, all right. And then right here, the very last paragraph, when human beings are regarded as moral beings, sex, instead of being enthroned upon the summit, administering upon rights and responsibilities, sinks into insignificance and nothingness. My doctrine then is that whatever it is morally right for a man to do, it is morally right for a woman to do. Our duties originate not from difference of sex, but from the diversity of relations in life, the various gifts and talents committed to our care, and the different areas in which we live. In other words, what she's saying here is that men and women are essentially morally equal, and that they should both be opposing the the institution of slavery. So she's saying that women, they should be in the abolitionist movement, which of course is in complete contradiction to what Catherine Beecher in passage 1 is saying. Okay. Once again, you want to make sure that you're reading actively and you understand what the author or her main point is and how what she does or what he or she does with the main point, and how each paragraph is developed. You know what the point of the paragraph is, and take your time. It's going to take some time and practice, but it'll make working with passages much easier. Now we can move on to the questions. Question 11 is the first question of this particular passage. And you notice that it's circled, and that's for a reason. When you first are working with a passage, it often helps to quickly look at the questions and circle the ones that are what the SAT calls is command of evidence questions. So here's 11, and here's 12, and you can see the in this particular question, you've got 4 lines that are designated here as answer choices. And whenever you see this right here, usually it means that this question 12 is a command of evidence pair. In other words, 11, which is circled, and 12, which is also circled, are part of a pair. What does that mean? That means that if you're having problems determining the answer of question number 11, but you see that it's circled, you can go to question 12. And what the College Board has done is given you 4 lines of text, one of which contains the information to come up with the correct answer to question number 11. Usually, in most passages, there are 2 command of evidence pairs, which means there are 4 questions. And you can use this to your advantage by realizing that the second question of a pair gives you 4 lines of information, one of which is going to contain the information to come up with the correct answer to the previous one. In this particular case, if you answer question 11, if you know the answer, then this one becomes very easy because you're going to use the information in one of the lines designated here to come up with your answer. So let's go on and look at the trying to answer question number 11. Question 11. In passage 1, Beecher makes which point about the status of women relative to that of men? Well, remember that when we were actively reading the passage number 1, the first paragraph indicated that women are subordinate or inferior to men, but that is because because they're inferior doesn't necessarily mean that their contribution or their acting is not important. Okay, that's essentially what is being said here. Heaven has appointed to one sex the superior and to the other the subordinate station, but this is a direction reversal word. While a woman holds a subordinate relation in society, it is to the other sex. It is not because it was designated that her duties or influence should be any less important or all-pervading, but it was designed that the mode of gaining influence and exercising power should be altogether different and peculiar. If we look at our answer choices, we see that number B, or that answer choice B, women are inferior to men. Well, that's exactly what is being said here. That means this particular part of the answer is correct. And let's go ahead and look at the second portion of the answer. But women play a role as significant as that played by men, and that's exactly what this is saying right here. Okay. So this is going to be our correct answer. Answer choice B for question number 11. And once again, we realize that because we circled question number 11, that the next one is question 12, is going to be part of a command of evidence pair. Let's go on to look at question number 12. Question 12. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? The first thing we're going to do is just ignore the word best, and we're going to read the question as which choice provides the evidence for the answer to the previous question. Well, we realized that lines 6 through 12 here were the lines that allowed us to come up with the correct answer to question number 11, and we decided that the correct answer to question 11 was B. Therefore, lines 6 to 10 are the lines that are saying that are giving us the information to come up with the correct answer. But while women holds a subordinate relation in society to the other sex, in other words, women are inferior, it is not because it was designed that her duties or her influence should be any less important or all-pervading, but it was designed that the mode of gaining influence and of exercising power should be altogether different and peculiar. So answer choice A for question 12 is the correct answer. Let's go on to question number 13. Question 13. In passage 1, Beecher implies that women's effect on public life is largely. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to sort of ignore the word implies and say in passage 1, Beecher says that women's effect on public life is largely. Notice that if you go ahead and substitute the word says for implies, it takes a lot of the complexity out of the question. It implies means that it may be hard for you to come up with the information for the correct answer, but just simply saying in passage 1, Beecher says that women's effect on public life is largely okay. So we know from reading actively that women, although they're inferior to men, according to this author, they are no less important than men when it comes to providing some sort of benefit. Okay, and here we have a little bit further down in the passage, because remember, as you're working through the passage, the questions usually follow the path of the passage. Woman is to win everything by peace and love, by making herself so much respected, esteemed, and loved that to yield to her opinions and to gratify her wishes will be the free offering of the heart. But this is to be all accomplished in the domestic and social circle. Okay? So, in other words, women are more or less constrained to having their influence in a domestic and social circle. So, once again, reading the question in passage 1, Beecher says that women's effect on public life is largely, we know that women aren't supposed to be actually actively working in the public life. And so we look at answer choice B, indirect, okay? Because women exert their influence within the home and the family life, and that is exactly what is being said here, but this is to be all accomplished in the domestic and social circle, okay? In other words, the correct answer to this question is going to be something that rephrases, restates, demonstrates, or paraphrases something from the passage. And this is the area in a passage where we have the information to come up with the correct answer. But this is to be all accomplished in the domestic and social circle. Answer choice B is the correct answer. In passage 1, Beecher says that women's effect on public life is largely indirect because women exert their influence within the home and the family life. Let's move on to question 14. Question number 14. As used in line 2, station most nearly means, well, this is a vocabulary and context question. We're going to have to go to line 2 and look for the word station. Heaven has appointed to one sex the superior and to the other the subordinate station. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking each of the answer choices and substituting them for station here and seeing which one makes sense. Okay. Also, we're going to reread the question as used in line 2, station. Forget about most nearly. The SAT or College Board puts that in there to make the question seem more difficult than it really is. So we're going to read the question as used in line 2. Station means, now A, B, and C, they all refer to physical locations or whatever. And it looks like by the process of elimination, it looks like D, rank, would be the correct answer. So what we're going to do is we're going to substitute rank for the word station and reread our sentence. Heaven has appointed to one sex the superior and to the other the subordinate rank. Well, that certainly makes sense, much more so than A, B, or C. So D, indeed, is the correct answer to question number 14. And remember to ignore or cross out most nearly. Question number 15. This is another vocabulary and context question. As used in line 12, peculiar, once again, most nearly, we're going to cross it out or ignore it, means, so we're going to go to line 12. 11, 12. Okay, and I'm going to read the sentence, but it was designed that the mode of gaining influence and of exercising power should be altogether different and peculiar. So we're going to look at each of our answer choices here, and we're going to see which word will fit best when substituted for peculiar, altogether different and peculiar. In other words, we look at different and we see distinctive, and they sort of go together, just as different and peculiar go together. So the other ones, A, B, and D, don't really make much sense. So once again, we're going to answer the question. As used in line 12, peculiar means distinctive. And if we substitute it in the sentence, but it was designed that the mode of gaining influence and of exercising power should be altogether different and distinctive. Perfect fit. Question 15, answer C is the correct answer. Question 16, what is Grimke's central claim in passage 2? Well, you can sort of ignore central and read the question as what is Grimke's claim in passage number 2? And one of her claims here is human beings have rights because they are moral rights. The rights of all men grow out of the moral nature. And as all men have the same moral nature, they have essentially the same rights. Okay? Now, we're going to jump down to this part. Now, if rights are founded in the nature of our moral being, then the mere circumstance of sex does not give to man higher rights and responsibilities than to women. Okay? So right here, she's talking about rights, and we see one of the answer choices has rights in it, rights of individuals, and she's saying here now, if rights are founded by the nature of our moral being, then the mere circumstance of sex does not give man higher rights and responsibilities than to women. In other words, the rights of individuals are not determined by race or gender, and that's exactly what is being said in this portion of the text. And once again, the correct answer, A, is going to reflect, rephrase, restate, or demonstrate something from the text. And this is exactly saying the same thing as this section of the text. Now, if rights are founded in the nature of our moral being, then the mere circumstance of sex does not give to man higher rights and responsibilities than to women. Okay? So once again, A is going to be our correct choice. Question number 17. Once again, we see that question number 17 is circled. And we'll go to question number 18. It's also circled. We recognize all answer choices referencing lines, and that's because question number 18 is the second question of a command of evidence pair That begins with question number 17. So, question number 17 in passage 2, Grimke makes which point about human rights? Well, we realize that this particular paragraph here deals with human rights, okay? Let's say we're a bit confused and we're not exactly sure what the correct answer is. So we're going to go to question number 18 and look at the answer choices that they give us. One of which is going to contain the information that will allow us to come up with the correct answer. So we're going to look at lines 58 to 61, 58. Human beings have rights because they are moral rights. The rights of all men grow out of their moral nature. And as all men have the same moral nature, they essentially have the same rights. Okay? Now, go back to number 17 here. Grimke makes which point about human rights? Well, here she's describing human rights, okay? And in the very next sentence, she makes a point about these rights. These rights may be wrested from the slave, but they cannot be alienated. His title to himself is as perfect now as it is that of Lyman Beecher. It is stamped on his moral being and is like that imperishable. So these are lines 61 to 65, which are referenced in answer choice B. So in this particular sentence right here, she's making she's making a point right here, a point about human rights, okay? These rights may be wrested from the slave. In other words, these rights can be taken away from the slave because the slave has no rights by law, okay? And if we look at lines 61 to 65, these make a point about the rights and it seems to be the correct answer for question 17. In passage 2, Grimke makes which point about human rights? They retain their moral authority, okay, regardless of whether they are recognized by law. And that's exactly what these lines 61 to 65 are saying. These rights may be wrested from the slave, in other words, taken away from the slave, but they cannot be alienated. His title to himself is as perfect now as is that of Lyman Beecher. It is stamped on his moral being and is like it imperishable. And that's exactly what answer choice B is saying. They retain their moral authority regardless of whether they are recognized by law. Okay? And question number 18. We realize that these lines right here, 61 to 65, are the lines that from the text that we use the information to come up with the correct answer. So 18B is going to be the correct answer, and 17B is also going to be the correct answer. Okay. So that's another way where we're recognizing that question 17 right here was part of a command of evidence pair, and that we use that to our advantage to get the information to come up with the correct answer to question 17. Okay? We'll go on now to the next question. Question number 19. Which choice best states the relationship between the two passages? Well, we're going to forget about the word best and we're going to rephrase the question. Which choice states the relationship between the two passages? Well, we know that passages 1 and passages 2 are have conflicting viewpoints, okay? in regards to women's participation in the abolitionist movement. Okay, and number one, or passage number one, um, here this particular grouping of sentences, we'll go through them. But whatever, in any measure, throws a woman into the attitude of combatant, either for herself or others, whatever binds her in a party conflict, in other words, participating in the abolition movement, whatever obliges her in any way to exert coercive influences, again in the abolition movement, throws her out of her appropriate sphere. If these general principles are correct, they are entirely opposed to the plan of arraying females in any abolition movement. In other words, women should stay out of the abolition movement. And then on passage number 2 by Grimke, she takes the opposite view. My doctrine then is that whatever it is morally right for man to do, in other words, to oppose slavery and to join the abolitionist movement, it is morally right for a woman to do. What to do? Well, to join the abolition movement. Okay? So we have conflicting viewpoints in the answer that reflects this particular relationship is answer choice B. Passage 2 takes issue with the primary argument of passage 1, and that goes perfectly in line with once we realize that these two passages have conflicting viewpoints, and the information for one particular viewpoint is here, and the information for the other viewpoint is right here. And the answer choice, the correct answer choice reflects that. Passage 2 takes issue with the primary argument of passage 1. Question 20. Based on the passages, both authors would agree with which of the following claims? Okay. Well, I mean, from our reading of each particular passage, you'd have to say that women have both moral duties and responsibilities. For instance, this particular portion of passage 1 goes ahead and outlines that the fact that women have moral duties and responsibilities. And then here in passage 2, my doctrine then is that whatever it is morally right for man to do, it is morally right for women to do. Our duties originate not from difference of sex, but from the diversity of our relations in life, the various gifts and talents committed to our care, and the different areas in which we live. So, answer A, women have moral duties and responsibilities, is the one that makes sense. Now, answers B, C, and D, these particular answers may be true, but they are not mentioned in the passage, and therefore they're trash or junk answers. B, men often work selflessly for political change. Well, that may be true, but it's never mentioned in either passage. Okay, the ethical obligations of women are often undervalued. Well, there's nothing in either passage that is indicating that the ethical obligations of women are often undervalued. Okay, and then D, political activism is as important for women as it is for men. Well, that certainly is true, but there's nothing in the either passage that is saying political activism is as important for women as it is for men. The only answer that makes sense by the process of elimination is A, women have moral duties and responsibilities, and that is indicated in each passage. Okay. So this is a question which you can easily cross out. Answer choices B, C, and D, which there is no indication in either passage about any of these particular points, and therefore by default, answer choice A, women have moral duties and responsibilities, is the correct one, and that's basically what each passage is saying. Okay. Let's go on to 21, which is the last question. Question number 21. Beecher would, we're going to ignore most likely, would have reacted to lines 65 to 68 of passage 2 with, so we're going to go to lines 65 and 68. And now, if rights are founded in the nature of our moral being, then a mere circumstance of sex does not give to man higher rights and responsibilities than to women. Okay? Well, we know that these two authors are differing in their regards to whether or not women should participate in the abolition movement. Grimke, of course, is saying that they should, and Catherine Beecher says that they shouldn't. So, looking at our answer choices here, looking at the verbs here with our actually nouns, Beecher would have reacted to lines 65 to 68, saying that there's no difference between men and women in regards to participating in opposition to slavery. In other words, being part of the abolitionist movement. Beecher would not have reacted with sympathy because she disagrees. With agreement, definitely not because she disagrees. With dismay, not really. Looking at answer choice D, disagreement, because she feels that the natures of men and women are fundamentally different, which is going to be the correct answer. And essentially, this is said in the first paragraph here that she considers men, or the natures of men and women, to be different. And because of that particular difference, women should not be participating in the abolitionist movement. Okay? The easiest way to approach this particular question is to realize that Beecher is going to have a basic disagreement with Grimke. And if Grimke believes that now if rights are founded in the nature of our moral being, then a mere circumstance of sex does not give to man a higher rights and responsibilities than to women. Okay? In other words, Beecher is going to disagree with that. And answer choice D goes ahead and says that. Beecher would have reacted to lines 65 to 68 of passage 2 with disagreement because she feels that natures of men and women are fundamentally different. And once again, that is indicated in the first paragraph. That does it for this particular dual passage regarding a great global conversation. And then we'll move on to passage number 3.